What is going on, everybody? It is your boy Radical Pubes here, back at it once again to deliver you some sweet motorcycle knowledge. Today we're going to be looking at rev matching and engine braking. I've gotten a lot of questions lately about what's that cool thing I'm doing while I'm riding that makes the bike loud, and why do I do it so aggressively? Rev matching is one of the most fun things about motorcycling, in my opinion, other than, you know, going fast and leaning and doing all that fun stuff and cracking woolies and stuff like that. But I do think that correctly rev matching on a motorcycle is one of the most satisfying things you can do. And today I'm gonna walk through how you can do it, why you should do it, and just as much as I know about it. So if you like what you're seeing so far, that was kind of weird, feel free to subscribe. We're doing a bunch of cool stuff here. And by the way, this is a motorcycle we're gonna be working with today. This is a 2017 Yamaha FZ07. This is our giveaway motorcycle. So if you're interested in learning more about how you can win this motorcycle, click the link below for our Patreon to find out all the details how you can win this bike. It's pretty cool. It's got a full Leo Vinci on it. It sounds molto bene. And that's it. Yeah, let's get started. So before we actually get out on the road and I show you guys in real time how to rev match and do all kinds of cool stuff like that, we're actually going to look at it here in the garage first. Here in my garage, give you all some knowledge. And yeah, so let's mount up really quick. So as you saw in our what does it feel like to ride a motorcycle for the first time video, you should be familiar with some of the controls here, so I'm not going to go over in depth on that. If you're interested in some of that stuff, do go and check out that video, how it feels to ride a motorcycle for the first time. I kind of go over pretty in depth on the controls, some of the features of a motorcycle that's different than a car if that's the background you're coming from. So we're going to skip over that. So assuming you have a rudimentary understanding of what the motorcycle controls are. So, in order to rev match, a few moving components have to happen. One, you have to decide what gear you want to go down into, right? So let's say you're in fourth gear, right? You're cruising down the street, you're in fourth gear, kind of just chilling on the throttle, keeping it maybe like an eighth open. You're just, cruising down the street. If you want to go down a gear, right? Normally, you would have to engage the clutch, let off the throttle, select the gear down where you want to go, and then pull the throttle back on and get back on the throttle, right? If you were to do that without rev matching and getting the engine up to the correct engine speed to match the transmission's gear that you want to go into, you're gonna do what's known as, there's a couple names for it, right? It's gonna shudder the bike, it's going to make it feel kind of lumpy, right? If you're familiar with the manual transmission in a car, it's the same story, right? If you try to go from third to second, you're gonna make everything kind of shake if you don't correctly rev match. So what you'd wanna do is you're in eighth throttle, just cruising down the street. When you wanna select a gear down, you would let off the throttle, pull in the clutch, select the gear down, and then when you select it down, blip the throttle a little bit, just give it a quick little rev so the revs build up to the speed that you're going to hit, the engine speed you're gonna hit, and then you let out the clutch. It sounds more complicated than it really is. We'll see once we take the bike out on the road, but it's a pretty simple procedure. So really, all it looks like is something like this. And it's this really fine timing between the three of your limbs kind of working together, and I'll show you that in depth. So as I mentioned, one of the main reasons you'd want to do this is so that your engine doesn't bog down whenever you're going down a gear, right? Because everything on a motorcycle is about being as smooth as possible, right? If you downshift and all of a sudden you don't rev match and you're shaking the rear end and everything's kind of getting out of control, especially if you're a newer rider, that's gonna scare you a little bit, right? The good thing is, most motorcycles are relatively forgiving if you're able to shift down pretty quickly without rev matching. They're not gonna like you very much, but it's not gonna be a disaster. If you were to, however, let's say you're in sixth gear and then for some reason you decide that you want to keep rolling on the throttle and then pull in the clutch and select down like 3 gears, let the revs go all the way down and then pull it back up. What's going to happen is the clutch is going to take all of that new load that you just put on the bike, right? Like that's just gonna make it's that sound whenever someone drives a manual transmission car, and it's like that sound because it's the engine just trying to match the new transmission speed that you just gave into it, right? The last thing you wanna do is pull that thing out super fast because that's gonna spell disaster. Don't do that. So that's basically the benefits of rev matching. The other thing you want to do as well is engine braking, right? So engine braking is pretty related to rev matching in the sense that when you do rev match down a gear successfully and smoothly, what that's going to do is allow the bike to slow down on its own due to the engine speed matching the transmission speed and giving that load back on the bike without you having to press the brakes. So it's an extra way of like adding some braking power to your motorcycle without just squeezing the lever. It also is a smooth way to slow down your bike, right? You don't have to necessarily pin the brakes to slow down. You could be in 5th gear and then downshift twice and be in 3rd, let the revs kind of build and slowly just, it'll start coming to a stop. That's why if you've ever seen a motorcycle in front of you in traffic, sometimes they slow down without hitting their brakes, and you might come up closer to them and you're like, oh, did they stop accelerating? Well, no, they might have just switched a gear down and then slow down that way. So that's a bit of a look in depth on why you'd want to rev match and why you'd want to engine brake. So now let's get out on the road and show you in real time what that kind of looks like.
Alrighty boys, what's going on? And girls, of course. We're now on the bike. I've ridden up to this random spot, I guess. This bike is just so fun, you just want to keep riding it. So I just started it up back at my place, rode all the way up here. A little further than I thought, but it's just so fun, you want to keep riding it. So let's jump into this whole rev matching engine braking stuff. But of course, let's get a quick sound check. Woo-wee, I love this bike, man. God. So I'm going to get out on the street because I think that's going to be easier to show you guys. Also, this bike finally has a full system on it, so you can really hear the downshifts happening. So as we mentioned in the garage, the reasons you'd want to rev match is because if you just grab down a gear, it's not going to be very smooth. So you want to make sure that you're always smooth when you're riding. All right. So we are cruising in 4th gear right now, trying to not hit this guy in front of us. Cruising in 4th gear. The throttle is what I like to call maintenance throttle, so that's all it is. It's just open to make sure that you keep going the same speed that you're going at, right? So we're doing like 43 miles per hour now. And following the procedure we mentioned in the garage, what we're gonna do in one fluid motion is pull in the clutch, blip the throttle, shift down a gear, and we should be good to go. So we're coming up to this red stop sign, red light here, and then down a gear, down a gear, down one more gear. It's pretty simple when you know how, right? It's pretty easy. But to be honest, what it really boils down to is just that that coordination between your 3 limbs, like we've always talked about in our how to ride a motorcycle, what it feels like to ride a motorcycle for the first time video. Basically, it's all it comes down to is these 3 kind of components. You have your throttle, you have your clutch, and you have your shifter. If you can manage those 3 pretty effectively, you're going to be a good rider, so you should be in good shape. So we'll demonstrate once again as we take this right-hand turn. Down a gear, down a gear. Simple. It's all about the smoothness of coordination, right? And let me show you guys really quick too. If you're in 4th gear, right? We're doing 44 miles an hour right now. If I shift down into 3rd, you notice we're slowing down. We're at 38 now. I never touched the brakes, right? All I did was shift down a gear, but because the load is being pushed into the bike, you're stopping it anyways, So we can do that up here at this stop as well. Makes it nice and smooth, and it's really fun too. So now I'm going to show you guys what happens when you try to downshift without rev matching. I'm going to try to do it as smooth as I can, otherwise we're going to judder the shit out of this clutch. So if I try to shift down without rev matching, oops, see, you get some of that. I'm so used to rev matching it, my brain stopped working for a sec, actually. But let's try again. Let's go real nice and smooth here. See, the bike really lurches forward and it doesn't like you very much. Rev matching ensures that you're able to shift really smoothly and grab a gear down when you need to. So again, let's go from 4th to 3rd, but actually downshifting this time. And see, now we're still moving at the same speed. We're just at a higher RPM because the engine is now matched to the new gear that it's in for the transmission, right? So 48 miles per hour in 3rd gear sits at about 5,000 RPM rather than 4,000 in 4th gear. And keep in mind too, guys, rev matching is not going to hurt your bike in any way, shape, or form. It's what it was designed to do. Motorcycles are actually very, willing to rev and do all that kind of stuff. You're not hurting the engine. Actually, you're probably hurting the engine by not downshifting correctly. You're hurting your transmission and your chain and your clutch. So whenever you're grabbing down a gear, make sure that you're blipping the throttle correctly. So the other thing I wanted to mention too is, you don't have to just rev match and downshift and do all that without your brakes. You can actually, with enough finesse, you can grab your front brake lever and depress the brakes while you downshift, right? So that's what I did on that one corner back there, but I'll show you guys here really quick because there's not much traffic behind us. If I brake, see, I'm grabbing the brake lever while I do it, and the increase in stopping power is dramatic. You'll really notice it as opposed to just braking and trying to grab down a gear without rev matching correctly. And that one's it's a bit more complicated because now you're involving every single component on the bike except for the rear brake. You're depressing your front brake lever, you're rev matching. There's this really fine balancing act between your wrist and your front fingers, or your two little fingers right there, the clutch, and then your shifter down below. But when done correctly, boy, it is satisfying. It is so satisfying to be braking and then downshifting. It's even more fun when you trail it into a corner and bang them down as you're leaning over. That's a lot of fun. I'm still getting used to that one. I've only done it a few times at the track, and it's a little scary at first to be grabbing the brake and dipping into a corner and banging down gears, but boy, it's fun. And so again, we'll demonstrate here. Coming up to a corner, we'll put it up in 5th. Actually, let's do 6th just so you guys get a feel. So we're in 6th gear right now. I'm going to shift down 3 gears before we enter this turn right here. So we go 1, 2, 3. We're in 3rd gear. And see, you get the correct engine speed you want for the corner you want. So matching your engine revs to whatever corner you're about to go into is really important because you don't want to be too low down in the revs because you're not going to get the correct drive out of a corner. You also don't want to be too high because that's going to make everything a little too twitchy. You're not in the right gear, you're way too high in the revs, and then you won't be able to drive out of a corner like you need to. The other thing you got to note too is I actually have some nerve damage in my right arm and my right wrist, which I am currently working around. But that's why sometimes in my videos it seems like I rev match a little aggressively. It's because I don't have super fine motor control on my right wrist like I used to, but it's good enough to ride and it's good enough for me, so I'm happy to be on the bike. And you'll notice too, engine braking is really important when you're doing slow speed stuff like this, because you're in 1st gear right now. You don't really need to go into 2nd while you're just kind of cruising around more low speed, kind of more populated area. Then you let off the gas, and it just slows right down. You don't really need to rev match when you're in 1st gear like that. You can just kind of let off the throttle, it'll slow down, depress your clutch, use a little bit of rear brake to be smooth, and then get back on it, and it's nice and smooth like that, So anyways, guys, hope you got a good feel for rev matching, downshifting, engine braking, that kind of stuff. What do you think? Did I miss anything? Hopefully I did not. I might have misspoken about some of the mechanics and things like that, but I think I hopefully got some beginner riders a good feel for why you'd want to downshift, why it's nice to downshift, why it's important to downshift like this. down a gear, down a gear, down a gear, grab the brakes, goof around a little bit, clutch in. So yeah, anyways, hope you enjoyed. If you like the content, be sure to subscribe, leave me a like, leave me a comment. I always like reading what you guys think. And yeah, I'll catch you in the next one. See you later.